and I use the revolution word sparingly, but I reckon we're on the cusp of serious change.
Quo presents Hybrid Lives with David Keane.
Good morning, Hans Meyer, the co-founder of Zoku. We are very honored, Hans, for you to join us today to continue our mini-series on the meaning of hybrid space, the implication of hybrid space, what it means for not just hospitality, but or the hotel industry or residential, but what it means, or office. What does it mean for the future of society? I think it's fascinating to me that you guys at Zoku and us at Quo, absolutely coincidentally and absolutely at more or less the same time, both issued or both published white papers on the future of hybrid space. We did it because we see that the future of office has changed, the future of hospitality has changed. Why did you do it?
Well, David, hello, and thanks for having me here. It's indeed kind of an interesting coincidence. The reason why we published a white paper around human connection was basically because after 2 years, we've been working in a kind of a lockdown. Now, the interesting subject in the beginning, when you were talking to HR managers or team leaders from bigger companies or smaller companies, everybody was very in favor of this new experiment where people started to work from home. It basically saved the commute. It created a more pleasant work-life balance. And even in a lot of instances, productivity went up. So in the beginning, this experiment was very favorable. As we went along, we found out that there were some other areas here, which were basically related to the lack of human connections. So when I've been talking with a lot of HR managers and team leaders, they, after 1.5 years, told me that actually people felt less engaged towards each other, less engaged towards the company. There was a lack of collaboration. There was a lack of sharing knowledge. So at some point, the negative sides of remote working started to appear. And at the end of the day, we very much believe there's a combination is the most ideal situation. So that means, again, the word hybrid. But what we learned during the course of the pandemic is that we are human creatures. We need social connections. We need a sense of belonging. And if we don't get that, our anxiety levels are going up, our stress levels are going up, we're starting to lose sleep. And that's also what we've seen in all the different statistics. So when we did our research, we talked with a lot of experts. We felt, okay, we should do something about that, especially also because hospitality companies are by nature a great opportunity where you bring a lot of people from different backgrounds and experiences together. However, in a lot of hotels, they hardly interact also there. And the interesting part is here that Zoku, from the beginning, our mission was not putting heads in beds, but connecting people and ideas. And everything within Zoku has been built around connecting people with each other, around facilitating human connections. And due to the pandemic, we've learned how important this is. And that was basically the reason to write this white paper.
There's so many questions I want to ask, and they're not all related, so I've got to remember which ones. I want to talk about, as I mentioned while we were chatting beforehand, I want to talk about human connection. I want to get into a very, I guess, fairly transformational topic of what is hospitality. For me, the perception of hospitality is in a state of flux. It's in a state of transformation. And as I mentioned, my 22-year-old son, in the summer, we were talking about this exact subject, and he said, "Dad, I think hospitality is about connections. It's about two people connecting." And if I extend that one step further, and then of course hand over to you. My why, so to speak, or my purpose, over the last 25 years has been to break down cultures, is to help. I've always felt that if two people of different backgrounds or different ethnicities or different diversity, different cultures come together and understand each other in the smallest possible way, and from the brands that we've created, we try to drive that in the smallest possible way. We've driven, or we've taken down one piece of sand from a wall to help people understand each other. And I love, I mean, genuinely love the purpose of Zoku being about human connection. Can you explain where that came about?
So first of all, I like your purpose because, and I truly believe this is world peace on a very small scale. When I started off Zoku, I started to talk to 150 people from the target audience. So people who needed to live and work for a number of weeks, months in a city they don't know, in a city where they don't speak the language, etc., etc. And although those people were socially very capable, 90% of those people, they told me that after a few days, weeks, they started to feel disconnected because they started to miss the friends, the family, the food of their mom, their dog, whatever. And in our industry, it's not very common to bring those people together. So we all can imagine, if people have traveled a lot in their lives, they can imagine that the most sad thing is to sit in your own in a restaurant without any interaction. And I like what your son is saying, because then the service can be amazing in that restaurant, but you're still alone. If you look to the core of what makes people happy, and there's great research around that, also a great research from Harvard, where they actually followed, it's one of the longest researches at Harvard. They followed people throughout their walks of lives, and it appears that people from 80 years and older are the most happy when they had a lot of human connections and a big social structure around them, whether it's family or friends, in their 50s. So we very much believe that human connection is a fundamental need of people. There's a great opportunity here. However, a lot of hoteliers have very much been focused on figures and spreadsheets. And we always believe you always should take people as your starting point. Build everything around that. And if you do that in the best possible way, the figures will be good. But that's not the starting point. So I'm a very true believer in what you actually say. I'm very happy that I found a partner in crime in this respect. And I think there's a huge opportunity for our industry here.
I couldn't agree. I genuinely couldn't agree. I really couldn't agree with you more. And it then comes to the question, but I believe it's in your white paper that, and I would probably argue it was something that I wanted to question, that 95% of, I want to say traditionalists, or perhaps people who were questioned, believed that we'd go back. And there's this whole movement of, we're going to go back to where we were 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever this crisis ends. And it's all going to be back to normal. The way that we travel, the way that we work, the way that we interact, the whole story. I don't believe that. I challenge it. I believe that and that's why we've both published at the same time, there's going to be some form of hybrid. And while we all acknowledge there's a need for connection, there's also a need to be alone because productivity, there's also a need to find that balance. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think it depends on who you're asking. There are a lot of CEOs of bigger companies, they think everybody will go back to the office. But if you just follow every day the post on LinkedIn, there's something else going on. Whether you call it the great resignation, people just don't want to go full back to the office. There are a number of people who want to go back. There are a number of people that don't want to go back to the office a single day. But the majority will have a kind of want to have a kind of a flexibility around it. And I think that is going to happen. But the role of the office is going to change. It doesn't make any sense anymore to commute for 1.5 hours, open up your laptop, sit 8 hours behind your laptop, commute 1.5 hours back to your home. Doesn't make sense. That is something that people can do perfectly at home, if actually home allows. People also will use third places for that, or other places for that. And the office will be a kind of a place where people actually come together, where they share knowledge, where they collaborate, etc., etc. So what I believe is that the workplace will be a kind of a workplace ecosystem, where the companies who do the right thing actually give their talent the opportunity to choose what actually fits with them. But at the same time, companies still need to foster, to stimulate that people are going to meet each other. Because also for a number of people, some people are very easygoing in making connections. Other people are a little bit more introvert. But even for those introvert people, it's now and then good that they go into a kind of an environment where they meet other people. Because the most successful teams are always the teams where people are well connected and work together with each other. Should that be in an office, or should it be in a kind of an offsite and a corporate retreat? That doesn't make a lot of differences. But I actually agree with you. There will be a few companies going back. I mean, people love habits, but at the same time, also, I feel COVID acted as a kind of a catalyst for a lot of development and basically speeded up something which was already happening.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're obviously of like mind. I completely agree. I mean, I've as I've said publicly, and I've said a lot, that it's an accelerator rather than it's not the catalyst, but it's an accelerator of what's happening. And for those who haven't read the Zoku white paper, it was a statistic that you were just that you were just talking about. I mean, where it clearly states 73% of the workforce is stated are looking for flexibility, and then I think it's 41% of the global workforce considering leaving their current job, and it's that number, which is obviously a reflection of corporate culture, so to speak, because they wouldn't be considering leaving their job. 41% of people wouldn't be considering leaving their jobs if the corporate culture was such that they loved it and they wanted to stay. And that, I'm imagining, will also be a catalyst of change. But I'm also seeing, and I'm sure I imagine you'll agree, is that the change today is not coming from our generation. The change today is coming from our kids' generation, from my teenage daughter's generation, my 22-year-old son's generation, from this generation, who are absolutely marching into the future and driving all of the change that in everything that I'm doing, that more or less I'm creating. That we're creating. Do you see the same?
Yeah, I think the same. I'm not always reflecting on generations. It's more kind of a mindset, but the majority of this mindset is definitely with the younger generations. And I think they're also better at certain things than my generation. I mean, they are much more focused on balancing work and private life. They are more they're stronger on making decisions what works ideally for me, and they're very much opening the conversation, but also helping us, also the younger people in within Zoku. And I'm the eldest guy within the company, so our average age is much lower. But I really love their thinking and their creativity to shape how this future of work is going to emerge, and at the same time also making sure that the fun remains there, but also productivity is still very high. So what I actually see is by putting people first in your company, you have a very motivated and passionate workforce, and especially if you link your company to a higher purpose than just return on investment, I think that's really something that people are very much interested about and they want to identify themselves with.
Yeah, but well, obviously, we're of the same mindset. That I mean, and we talk about typologies and mindsets rather than generations. But in this case, the mindset and purpose, belief, ESG, the from a branding point of view, from the work that we do in terms of defining brands, the younger, it is almost the demographic. The younger generation are the ones who are the most discerning today. They're the ones that are making the choices. They're the most fickle. So, I mean, it was, it was the Gen X, or Generation X that people started talking about being really fickle. But today, brands are really, we're forming brands around purpose more than we ever have, more than we ever have before. I just want to go back to this idea of transformation and returning to normal. Because one of my thoughts was that, do you think returning to normal is a function of a lack of imagination or habit? And given that the way of the digital world and how the younger generation are demanding change, that hybrid or permanent disconnection from a central office is inevitable, just also because of technology and digitality.
And what exactly do you mean? Do you feel that we still need offices?
I think we need a hybrid space. I mean, we're actually imagining now, we have an office where we can fit about 100 people here. We're thinking of going back. We're going to hot desks for about 50 people. And we think that for ideation, social, we need a shared space. But obviously we're a creative firm. For creation, not necessarily, and certainly not for our writers, for content producers. But there is a social need. I'm not sure how that's going to evolve, and I want to get to that because let's talk about that first. Let's talk about sort of creativity and digitality and the digital universe is now running into the future. We've been asked 3 times this week to create a metaverse, virtual concepts for people, literally 3 different clients in 3 different places around the world, completely unrelated. It is unprecedented. I mean, it is, I don't want to use cliches, but it's kind of unprecedented.
Well, I think the interesting thing is if we have a kind of a debate around space, for example, and how we're using space, and we talk about sustainability being very much important, let's have a look at the traditional model of an office. Pre-corona, offices were there 8,700 hours per year, and we're only used 2,200 hours per year on average, if you deduct all evenings, nights, weekends, holidays, whatever. So apart from a school, the office is the least efficient way of using space. And we've built billions of square meters around the world for it. The interesting thing is, and not only from a kind of use and how we're going to use office, but also what do we want with all this space, and do we need more space? I think the interesting subject around the hybrid is can we stack different models on the same square meter, using space far more efficient, then it becomes financially more viable for people, but at the same time also more sustainable. And at the end of the day, I think it's interesting. It's more about what kind of function, because I every now and then need focus time, and then I'm sitting in my attic like I'm sitting today. But I also need a lot of conversations with other people, and then I really want to come together. There are certain meetings that can work perfectly via Zoom or Teams, but still there's for me a huge difference between sitting face to face, because it's far more difficult. I can see your body quite a lot, but most of the time you just see a face. It's far more difficult for me to estimate your body language and to also react on that. There are a lot of signals that you just don't pick up when you're behind the screen. So I think the interesting thing would be is, can we create spaces where different functions can come together, where we can use the space even better? And I think here's the interesting subject from a real estate perspective. If you talk about hybrid, we all know WeWork. And I think one of the reasons why WeWork is so successful is because of their model of densification. This is pre-corona. Eh? They put in quite a lot of people on the same floor plate. That makes their model so efficient. Now, if you look to co-working operators, they basically have to create their revenue in 50 hours per week, Monday to Friday, 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the evening. Now, if you look from a hospitality point of view, now it becomes interesting. Because, for example, at Zoku, due to the fact that we have the Zoku loft, where the bed actually is hidden, you create a totally different space. Because in the Zoku loft, you find everything to live comfortably and work efficiently. And where a normal hotel, the bed is the most dominant piece of furniture, within Zoku, the kitchen table is paramount. Now, what we learned during COVID is that bigger companies, their people, they had to work from home, but not everybody could work from home. So what they did, they rented a Zoku loft during the day because the bed is not there. So it's not awkward to invite even a colleague over or whatever. Now, the interesting thing is now that where WeWork is about densification, I think there's a huge opportunity for hybrid hospitality to go for a model for intensification.
What do you mean by that?
We have the opportunity to create a revenue model of 168 hours per week by stacking different business models on the same square meter. Because the Zoku loft is sold during the day as a workspace. At 5 o'clock, somebody's leaving. We clean the room, and in the night, somebody could stay over there for a night. And we even have the possibility in our social spaces, because between 7 and 9, there are a lot of people staying with us from companies in and around Amsterdam having breakfast. But during the day, members from Zoku, it's a little bit like the co-working model, they actually pay to work in our social spaces. They arrive. And at the end of the day, there's an interesting collision between those two people drinking beer and learn to know each other. So this kind of hybrid use, where you almost could live a kind of a vertical life in the same building, makes it very much interesting. But at the same time, also, you have to think about, okay, how can you connect those people, not only within your hotel building, but also in the city where you actually stay. And it can be from entertainment and culture. But for example, also we give people the opportunity at Zoku to do voluntary work in Amsterdam when they stay with us for 2 months or so. So this hybrid space is from a spatial point of view. It's from blurring between borders, between business models. But basically what's happened here is our lives are becoming more fluid. And our spaces should adapt to that instead of the other way around.
And apart from Zoku, and I mean, it's wonderful to hear. I mean, this is, as I mentioned to you before, Rob Wagemans, who I know you know, was talking about us being in puberty in terms of the development of space. That we are in our adolescence. Is your model the end game, or in your early 20s?
I think it's in the early 20s, because I don't believe in an end game. But what I truly believe, and that's not what I mean within about Zoku, but what I feel is that space development has always been based on bricks and mortar, spreadsheets, first the building,
return per square meter.
Return per square meter, first the building, then the design, and then people. I would love that we take an approach, people first, and we adapt everything around that. At the end of the day, it's about well-being. It's about happiness. It's about offering people, also in an urban context, a great quality of life. We actually, I mean, our industry, but also the real estate industry and even offices, have a huge opportunity here to do better than what we did in the past.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. But the models that we're imagining and the model that you are beautifully articulating, I have to say, has severe consequences for both the economic model of commercial real estate and for the current model of hotels, so to speak. How do you cross that bridge? How does that evolve?
It basically, so first of all, if you look to the projections of growth of real estate and how much resources we need to make this growth happening, I think it's enormous. However, you could argue whether that will make the world better, and is there not an opportunity to use our current real estate far more efficient? That's one. Because at the end of the day, I don't know whether we need much more concrete in the world, and of course, there's a huge industry behind it. But at the same time, I think also if you've seen the documentary or the movie Look Up at Netflix, there is a big climate problem at the moment, and and the only way to solve it is to fundamentally change our thinking. And also with regards to hospitality, we have to think about it. If you put a heat map on a hotel, then I think a lot of space is only used a fraction during the 24 hours period. We have lobby spaces. Before COVID, I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine. He used to be the GM of the Ritz-Carlton in New York. And he said, I've got a huge lobby. It looks beautiful. It's on the most expensive locations in the world, but you've got more people in your social spaces than I have at the moment. And that means that I think that where we have to think differently from our model as hotels. Hotels are a little bit like embassies in cities. You only go there when you need something. While at the same time, if all those remote workers, they also live around hotels. So what will happen if hospitality professionals start to think about, okay, can we become a kind of a clubhouse for this entire area? It's the same thing with, for example, Zoku. We see now that a lot of companies are going to work remote, fully remote. We now have the first companies that cancel their office leases. They rent space at Zoku as their office. And when they're not here, they work from home. Now, interesting here as well, and that can have a big impact. If I'm going to rent an office, I need to close a deal for 5 to 10 years. I have to guarantee. I have to give a guarantee. I have to take care of a fit out and making a big investment. And I have to take care of all the facility management. And then if I didn't do it very well, I end up with a relatively boring location, which is not fantastic for people to work. Where hospitality can come in, if people start to work 2 to 3 days per week at home, then it becomes for a company even cheaper to cancel the entire office and give people the allowance to work, for example, a few days per week at Zoku. And then they have all the things they actually need. And of course, there's certain things that you need to solve because there's something around corporate branding, there's something around data security. But these models are just going to evolve now. So there's a lot of opportunity there. But it definitely, what I truly believe, David, I think there will be an impact on real estate. There will be an impact on offices because at the end of the day, we will all realize we now have too much space and we need to use it differently. Interestingly, what we could do is to make sure that people find decent homes in cities areas. So maybe we have to convert offices into more co-living, residential spaces. So at the end of the day, I still believe there are huge opportunities to make quality life in cities better. But to just build more and more offices, I don't think that's the solution.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want to be a developer of commercial real estate today. That's for sure. I don't think anywhere. I'm say in Hong Kong or wherever it is, or in London or in anywhere. It's fascinating. I mean, there's so many thoughts. What's fascinating for me is, and this is sort of relates to a lot to the work that we've been doing for years, but things that are in brand that are out of brand. What I'm seeing today is what's pre-COVID and what's post-COVID, what's pre-COVID and what's post-COVID. And even if you talk about commercial real estate or the traditional, so to speak, office, which you so articulately explained is used for what 20% of the number of hours that it could be used. You look at these office buildings, no matter which city you're driving into or being on the edge of town or in downtown or in the center of town, you look at these buildings and you think they're antiques. And it doesn't matter how modern they are. It doesn't matter how fancy they are. They're beginning to look like antiques. And it's the same kind of questions that we through our adolescence and through our lives, we've said, oh no, there's no way that vinyl can go. There's no way that CD-ROMs can go. There's no way that this can go. That I'm beginning to see in this massive form, but what the implications of that are on the global economy. Is it really practical and economic to convert it? It's practical, but how economic is it to convert these spaces into residential or into some other purpose? But I live in Bangkok, where in 1997, 98, the global financial crisis really started, and there was a dearth of empty real estate, of gigantic towers that were just empty. Is that science fiction? Don't know. We're on what I do know. Sorry, let me just say one more thing. I really apologize. What I do know is that we're on the cusp, and I use the revolution word sparingly, but I reckon we're on the cusp of serious change.
I agree. And the interesting thing is we can be afraid of change and we can be concerned about change. But if something is going away, something new is coming back. And the big question here, also as an entrepreneur and as an hospitality professional, in which area do you want to be? And I felt that, and especially when COVID started, we had a kind of conversation internally within our company. And we said, how do we want to look back when this pandemic is behind us? And then what we agreed is we wanted to make and to take the best out of it. So we did a lot of experimentation, a lot of innovation, and a lot of studying how can we adapt our company towards this new reality and basically benefit from us in a way that it's not only beneficial for Zoku, but also beneficial for the world around us.
Hans Meyer, I think we could go on for ages, but data tells us that people like to listen for about 30 minutes.
Cool. Let's stop.
But Hans, thank you so much. I mean, we could obviously go on for a long time, and maybe we can do a part 2. But that was hair raising. That was a really meaningful conversation. I truly appreciate your time and appreciate you talking to us about the future of hybrid space. Hans, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. And I hope to see you soon in Amsterdam.
You will. Thanks a lot.
Bye.